Susanna and the Elders. This is my latest painting. This is a 2 feet by 2 feet oil on wood panel painting based on the biblical story of Susanna and the elders, the two old men that harassed her for sexual favors. This is a subject that appears in the book of Daniel, and like I said, this is my interpretation of the passage based on the painting by Tintoretto, whose real name was Jacopo Robusti, called Tintoretto. This Susanna and the Elders painting is located at the National Gallery of Art here in Washington, D.C. Well, near where I live. I don't live in Washington, D.C., but it's a couple of miles from where I live. But anyway, I went to see it the last time about a month and a half ago, and I got the inspiration to paint my own version of the passage of Susanna and the Elders from the book of Daniel in our Christian Bible. Well, we can start saying that I already painted that Tintoretto. I reproduced it, I copied it to study Tintoretto's painting style. It took me about a year to finish it. It's a huge painting, about 3 by 4 feet wood panel painting, oil on wood, and it was a very revealing experience for me, because I got to study and find out some of the tricks and techniques used by Tintoretto to achieve certain effects on his painting. Tintoretto is my second best, or my second favorite Renaissance painter, just after Titian. Titian is absolutely my master, my number one favorite painter, and Tintoretto is my second favorite painter of the same period. Anyway, both of them, here we have a picture of Tintoretto's self-portrait. Tintoretto lived a long life. He died at the age of 75, and all his life he spent it in Venice. He was a very strong man. That's why he was called Robusti. That means the strongest, the strong man. This is his house. I took this picture in Venice. It's still standing. I think the second floor is unoccupied, but other than that, this is the property where Tintoretto lived. He had his atelier, his workshop in the bottom floor, but anyway, that was his mansion. It's still standing in Venice, and very, very interesting place to visit. Anyway, going back to his painting, as we can see here, based on the story of Daniel about Susanna, Tintoretto made an interpretation of the passage and depicted Susanna getting ready to take a bath late in the afternoon, early evening, and we can see her here being attended by her servant young maid, which is offering a jar of oil. Back in the day, they didn't use soap, they used olive oil to rub it again all over their bodies, and with a tool, a curved dull knife if you want, they will remove the oil and the dirt from the top of their skin, and then they will wash off the rest of the oil in water. We can see here Susanna. She's getting ready to take the oil and spread it all over her body. She even has one foot in the water already in the fountain of the gardens in one of her husband's properties. You can see in the background under the arch, which is the entrance to the garden, the two old men talking about how they're going to approach Susanna with their indecent proposal. This is a very interesting story about the indecent proposal, and we will discuss it in a minute. About the indecent proposal, we can say that it's a very nice story in the book of Daniel. Daniel tells us the story of this young lady married to a merchant, very rich in Babylon. This is happening in the time of the Jewish exile in Babylon in the early 1st and 2nd centuries of the Christian era. The story is a developing story if we consider that the version that we have nowadays in our Bible is a more embellished tale as opposed to the more basic story of the same subject in the Greek Bible called the Septuagint, which means the 70 books, which is the Greek Bible. But anyway, in the 2nd century, a Jewish writer, Theodosian, embellished the story of Susanna and the elders, which basically is the story of these two Jewish judges, old men appointed to the Sanhedrin as judges of the people, fell in lust with this beautiful young woman, probably in her late teens, 18, 19 years of age, married to a very rich merchant in Babylon. Remember that this story is happening during the Jewish exile in Babylon. And one day they decided to approach Susanna and blackmail her, telling her that if she didn't comply with their requests, which were sexual in nature, they would tell her husband that she was being an adulterous woman, that she cheated on him with a young fellow. And the answer by Susanna was that she would never agree to comply with their request. She was a very virtuous woman. She would never betray her faith in God, her morals, her principles, and she refused to the advances of the two elders, who at the end went back to the Sanhedrin and accused Susanna of adultery. Also, they got to talk with Susanna's husband, and at the time, adultery was a mortal crime, a mortal sin, punishable by death. So anyway, the Sanhedrin, based on the prestige, the age, the position of the two elders, ruled in favor of the accusers, the elders, disregarding Susanna's accounts of the events. So they sentenced her to be lapidated, a sentence of death, where people would throw rocks at her to kill her. And one day, when she's been pretty much taken to the area where she's gonna be killed by stoning, Daniel, who's the writer of the book of Daniel, at the time was a young child in his 12th or 13th year of age. So Daniel, being a very wise young man who was in training to become a judge to the court of the Emperor Nebuchadnezzar, decided to intervene. So he stood in front of the crowd, taking Susanna to be killed. And Daniel very bravely stopped the crowd and told them that they were doing wrong because they never heard Susanna's accounts of the story. They just took the two old men's version and accounts of the event, and they never investigated deeply into the situation. So he convinced the crowd to take Susanna back to the courthouse and told them that they needed to interview the two old men separately. So that's what the people did. They took everybody back to the courthouse. They separated the two old men, and they asked them to tell their accounts of the story, which at the end were different from one another, especially in the sense that when they were asked where did they find Susanna cheating on her husband with this young fellow that they failed to mention to begin with, one of the elders said that they were laying down at the foot of a very thick tree. The other elder said the same thing, but they were laying down at the foot of a very thin tree. So that's how people realized that the two elders were lying, and they ruled that Susanna was innocent, and they let her go with her virtue restored, and her husband received her with open arms and told her that he never doubted her virtue. He never thought she had cheated on him with anyone. So everything ends very well for Susanna. But for the two elders, they were sentenced to death because they raised false testimony against an innocent person, and they lied. So they were condemned, and they were sentenced to death. But anyway, the moral of the story is that if you stick to your principles, to your morals, if you obey God, if you are a virtuous person, even under bad circumstances, even if when you're accused of doing something that you never did, the truth will come to light eventually if you have faith in God and you stick to your principles. Another moral of the story is that you shouldn't tell lies about other people. You shouldn't accuse anyone of doing something they didn't do, and there's consequences for that kind of actions, which is in this case death. It's a very nice story. Anyway, the story of Susanna and the elders sets a very interesting precedent for investigations in certain crimes. So it's a very interesting story in the book of Daniel. Going back to my painting that you can observe right here. This is my interpretation of Susanna and the elders, kind of following the steps of Tintoreto's interpretation of this same story. What I wanted to do here, and you can see really right now, that's my signature on a block of marble where Susanna is sitting. But anyway, what I wanted to do here is make my painting as if it were a second scene, a second act on this movie or this story, where Tintoreto's painting is the first scene, where you can see Susanna very calmly getting ready to take a bath at about 6:30, 7 p.m. in the evening, before the elders approach her. Actually, in the as you can see in a second here, when I put Tintoretto's painting back on the screen, you will see that the elders in Tintoretto's painting are under the arch outside the garden. The arch that you can see in the background of the paintings, mine and his, is actually the entrance to the garden where Susanna is taking a bath. But anyway, in Tintoretto's painting, the elders are outside talking amongst themselves about how they're gonna approach Susanna and blackmail her. And in my painting, the elders already came into the garden through the arch at the entrance, and they already stalking Susanna. Here in the painting, you can see that I use pretty much the same background as Tintoretto's painting to connect the two paintings and establish, like I said, a second scene or a second act of the story. Anyway, I put a lot of emphasis, I put a lot of work on the expressions, on the faces of my characters here in the painting. You can see this guy, one of the elders, who is a little more muscular, taller, thinner than the other old man that is approaching Susanna from behind. Like you could see, the facial expressions are very telling of what's going on in the painting. What I love about painting oil on wood panel paintings is that the painter have to tell a long and complicated story using only one image, one frame. Painting is very difficult. It's not like making a movie where you can tell a story in different scenes, in different frames, using voice, movement, color, action, etc., etc. In painting, you only have one frame, and the painter gotta use all his talents, all his experience and training to tell a story. Again, going back to my painting here, based on the facial expressions, you can tell that the story is as it goes. The story is as I'm going to tell you right now. You have Susanna, who is completely terrified. She's mortified to have these two old men approaching her, asking her for sexual favors. So look at her facial expression. She's in panic, and she is withdrawn, making her body smaller, covering her body with one arm, and with the left arm she's picking up her tunic, covering her pelvis. And you have the right hand of the old man in red tunic sticking his hand under the tunic, trying to touch Susanna. Then you have the two elders, based on their facial expressions, are using two different techniques to stalk, to harass sexually Susanna. One is using the good guy technique. You can have you can see the old man in the yellow or golden tunic is pretty much begging Susanna for sexual favors, and you can see how he is kind of lower in the stature when compared to Susanna, who's in the middle, and the elder with the red tunic in the left. The elder in the red tunic is using a different approach. He's being more aggressive, more cynical towards Susanna. in his advances for sexual favors. So you can see how Susanna is withdrawing from the elder to my right in the golden tunic, but she doesn't count with the fact that the other guy is behind her and is being more aggressive. He's going straight to touch her legs or whatever. And in his facial expression, you can say that you can pretty much think that he's mouthing words. So he's probably been cynical about the entire thing. Susanna is letting go a gasp. You can see her lips are parted, her mouth is open, and she's probably letting go a gasp of panic. And she's looking at the elder in the golden tunic with despair. And you can see his expression is like a begging expression. But anyway, and another trick I used for just to set the tone of the scene is that the guy that's begging is lower than the guy who's been more aggressive. The presence of the elder in the red tunic is more aggressive, more dominant of the scene, of the situation. He's already grabbing Susanna by the waist or whatever. But anyway, it's very interesting how a painter has to tell a big story in only one frame. Anyway, going back to the Venetian painting style, we can say that we always start with an underpainting. In my case, I use a color called salsa red. It's a burgundy, not quite a wine, a red wine color. It's called salsa red. It's a latex treatment in my underpainting. I prefer to paint on wood rather than canvas, and the reason is that wood acts like a sponge. Wood soaks up oil and color, and it helps in the long run to give us this three-dimensional effect of the finished painting, as I will show you at the end of this presentation. Wood is very, very, very nice. It's a very nice medium. I prefer it to canvas. Also, the colors run nicer, smoother on wood. One day I'm going to dedicate an entire video to the preparation of the wood before applying the underpainting, the red bowl. That's exactly how it's called. That red background is called red bowl. And in my case, again, I use a color called red salsa, and it's a water-based painting. Remember that you can never paint oil on an oil underpainting. Always paint lean on fat. You never go fat on fat, because you will have you will crack the surface of your painting. So lean over fat, and fat over water. In this case, oil over latex, water-based painting. Okay, once we have talked about the story of Susanna and the elders from the book of Daniel and the Bible, and after we touch some aspects of the composition, we can now start talking about the actual process of painting in the Venetian style. The Venetian style was developed in Venice, and over the centuries, probably started in the early 15th century, and was developed furthermore with the invention of the oil colors. Before that, painters used tempera. Tempera is a very difficult procedure. It's a very difficult technique because you have to use eggs as your medium. The yolk of an egg mixed with the color. And the problem with tempera is that the paint doesn't run as well as with oil. Then the other problem was that tempera dries too fast, doesn't give you the time to design your painting slowly, and making modifications doesn't let you spread the painting either over bigger surfaces. With the invention of oil, the Venetian technique evolved very fast. Painters then were able to paint bigger paintings faster, get brighter, fuller colors, use different colors or a bigger variety of colors as opposed to just the basic colors, and that allowed painters like Titian and Tintoretto in this case, or the Veronese painters, to master the oil technique. They decided to start painting on canvas rather than wood panel, and the reason is that wood panels are way more expensive as a place to paint, as a medium to paint. For example, a piece of wood like the one I used for this painting I'm showing you right now, guys, which is about 2 feet by 2 feet, 24 by 24 inches, and it's about, I want to say, 1/4 inch thick. If you want to use that kind of wood, especially if it's poplar, which is the wood preferred in the northern part of Europe as opposed to oak in the south. So poplar is a very expensive wood. Even if you go right now to a construction material store like Lowe's or Home Depot, if you are lucky enough to find a board of wood that big to begin with, and on those dimensions I just gave you, 2 by 2 by 1/4 inch thickness, you're gonna pay about $75 to $80 for a good quality board. So if you're a professional painter and you paint a lot, you're gonna spend a lot of money just in wood, and that is just the bare wood, let alone forget about the preparation, the materials to prepare the wood, and forget about the cost of the paint itself. But anyway, the other problem with wood is the size. You cannot find big sizes of wood, and in order to get big panels you have to put different size boards, glue them together, nail them to frames, and then you have the problem of having that line in between the boards that will never disappear. And the other problem with painting on wood is that over time wood changes shape, bends, warps, cracks, and depending on the humidity content of the air where the board is kept, you will have the board absorbing that water from the back of the panel and soak into the fibers of the wood and change the shape, expand the fibers, contract some other fibers depending on the weather, if it's cold or it's hot in summer. And you will have that over the years, we're talking about decades, maybe a couple of centuries, that board will definitely destroy the final product. That is one of the reasons why painters in the past weren't too fond of using wood as a medium. The other problem with wood is the weight. Wood is very heavy, especially oak and poplar. The problem with weight is that it's very difficult to ship. The other problem is that you are limited by the size of the board to what size is your painting gonna be at the end. So wood panels are reserved for small paintings, portraits, small landscapes, etc. And another problem with painting on wood is the shipping. If you have a final painting, and for example in the case of Titian, he received commissions from all over the world, the known world in his time. So if he painted his beautiful creations on wood, it would have been very difficult to ship these paintings to the final owner, to the commissioner of the painting. And we all know that Titian shipped a lot of paintings of his paintings to Spain, to Madrid, to the king, Philip II in Spain. So it's very difficult to do this with wood panels. Whereas if you use canvas, now we're going to talk about canvas. Canvas is a very nice medium or surface to paint on, because first of all, the size of your painting is just pretty much unlimited, and as it was demonstrated by the Venetian painters, especially Tintoretto, which was a master in painting huge paintings, huge compositions. He painted the biggest ever known one-piece painting in the world. It's kept in Venice. The dimensions, the exact dimensions escape my mind right now, but we're talking about something in the range of 130 feet long by about 10 feet tall, and is one of the biggest. And and he painted this creation himself with little help from his assistants from his workshop. So that tells you how more useful canvas are for painters. Imagine Tintoretto trying to paint that same painting with wood panels. First of all, transportation of those wood panels to the place of to the final place for the painting would have been a nightmare. Try to put those panels together, 130 feet long, 10 feet tall. Very difficult to do. And painters very seldom painted on site in the place where they were gonna place the painting permanently. So what they did was paint the canvases in their workshop, and then once the painting was finished, they would roll the painting regardless of whatever size they had, and then they would ship, or they would transport this rolled up painting on carts and on the shoulders of men to the place of final display. So that is one of the advantages, actually the greatest advantage of painting on canvas as opposed to wood. And another advantage, for example, in the case of Titian, we're saying that he painted huge paintings. Well, not as big or as huge as Tintoretto's, but he painted panels of 10 feet by 8 feet, sometimes 5 feet by 7 feet, etc. But still, he had to ship those paintings to Spain, or to the Netherlands, or to France, or Germany, Austria. So he had to finish the painting at his workshop, finish it, give it the final touches, Then remove the canvas from the frame, the temporary frame. Roll it up very good, package it, and ship it literally by ship to Spain. That was the easiest way to ship paint products by ship through the Mediterranean Sea. Or if he was shipping the product to northern Europe, he would have to send the painting rolled up in and mounted on carts. Anyway, this is the way Titian and Tintoretto work with canvas. The other thing is that canvas can be better prepared to withstand moisture and water damage. It is easier to make canvas more waterproof than it is to waterproof wood boards. So that's another advantage, and I'm telling you this because I work with both mediums. But anyway, at the end, and it's a very contradictory note I'm gonna make right now, is that even then I nowadays prefer to paint on board, because most of my paintings are not as big anymore, unless I have a big commission. Then I would use canvas. But for my own studies and the reproductions I make for my own personal museum, I use wood. And the reason is that nowadays, as opposed to 500 years ago, nowadays we have different products to make wood last longer. We can waterproof wood. We can nowadays find boards in bigger sizes. We can even even the availability of wood panels is better nowadays than back in the day. Pretty much back in the time of Titian and Tintoretto, they had to send their assistants, their employees, to the woods to select the poplar trees, fold them, and process the wood themselves, the wood boards, trying to get the biggest boards possible for their masters to paint on. But nowadays you just go to the store and just tell what size of board are you looking for, and they will find it for you. They will give it to you, or they can even order it to you, and you can get it at home, at your own home, your own house, in 4 or 5 days. And again, nowadays even the boards come from the lumber yards already prepared, waterproofed or moisture proofed, etc. And with all those chemicals we use nowadays, it's easy to prepare wood and make it last and prevent warping and excessive drying or excessive cracking due to the temperature effects on the board. But anyway, enough of that, and then next we're going to talk about the actual painting technique in the Venetian style. Well, about the Venetian style of painting as embraced or developed, mastered by Titian, Tintoretto, Veronese, Giorgione, even Bellini started painting in the so-called Venetian style. Anyway, again, Venetian style means painting either on wood or canvas, usually canvas, even though I paint on wood. But anyway, I have modified the style to suit my preference of wood panels. Anyway, the first step after selecting the piece of wood or canvas you're going to use as a surface to paint on, you have to prepare the medium, either the board or the canvas. The preparation of canvas and wood differ greatly. It's very easy to prepare canvas. You can just uh, uh, use a mixture of 50-50 water and Elmer's glue that nowadays is so readily available and so cheap. That is my favorite chemical to prepare canvas, because you want to make the canvas waterproof, and the easiest way to make fabric, in this case, because canvas is fabric, is cotton fabric. If you want to waterproof canvas, you gotta treat it first, the very first step, with 50-50 the dilution of Elmer's glue, white glue, and just regular water. It is a little, if it is better not to use cold water to dilute the glue. It's best if you just warm it up for a little bit. Get a lukewarm pot of enough water to dilute glue, and then with a paintbrush or with a brush, depending on how big is your canvas, an inch or 2-inch paintbrush, you can just go ahead and apply the glue dilution. I apply this mixture in several coats. I apply them also in both faces of the canvas. I apply it on the side I'm gonna paint on, and in the reverse, in the back. And I will tell you why. Because when you have your painting finished with all the oil layers on top and the varnish, the back part of your canvas is an open door to moisture. Moisture can get through the back of the canvas all the way through the layers of paint and start wreaking havoc on your painting. It's gonna crack it. Mixture of dry oil with water is terrible. Water is definitely gonna damage your painting. It's not gonna happen in a month or two, in a year or two. Yeah, over the decades, the damage is gonna be incredible. So if you want to preserve your painting for the centuries, it's best if you apply the glue solution on both sides of the canvas. And again, the more coats of glue dilution or solution, actually dilution, solution would mean that you use powder glue, but anyway, diluted glue in lukewarm water, applied several coats to your canvas. Don't overdo it. You don't want to end up with a rubbery, plasticky feeling canvas either. As long as you have the fabric texture, you are okay. But if you're adding too many layers of your glue, and you start feeling that you're gonna plastify that canvas, you gotta stop. So I will give you a number. If you can apply 3 coats of glue dilution to the front face and another 3 to the back of your canvas, you're okay. So you don't have to go and add too many layers of this solution. Anyway, let the canvas dry, all extended, spread on the stretcher if you already have it on, or let it hang free so the water dries off and leaves the glue in the fibers of the canvas. Anyway, after the canvas with the glue is completely dry, then you can start applying the bowl. You see here, for example, in my painting, in the background, that reddish is called salsa red. It's a latex painting that you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's a latex painting, water based. You apply that in at least 2 or 3 coats as your bowl. Sometimes I've been known to use only 1 layer of bowl, as to depending on the size of the painting. If it's a big If it's gonna be a big painting, I'm talking about in the 7 by 8 or 7 by 10 feet, go for the 2 or 3 layers of bowl. But if your painting is small, you just need one, because a smaller canvas bend a little more than big canvases. As long as you have them stretched up on a wood frame, one layer of bowl would be enough. Okay, after you have the bowl readily dried and ready to start painting, just go ahead and transfer either pencil your creation. I always go freehand, or if you're reproducing a painting, use a reticule from the, if you have a printout of the painting you're about to copy, just dry, a reticule, and then you copy the same lines in the same proportions, the same aspect or the same ratio to the surface of your painting or your canvas with on the bowl. If you go back and review this video or some other, you will see that I start with a very good drawing, a very detailed drawing. I even draw the wrinkles of the face or the freckles, because I want to be detailed. Titian, Tintoretto, Da Vinci, and Raphael, all of those painters always emphasize that if you don't start with a good drawing, you are never gonna have a good finished painting. The secret to have a beautiful painting at the end, after the entire process is finished and you end up varnishing your painted surface, the secret for all that is to start with a very good detailed drawing. And I will tell you this, the drawing is going to guide your hand. It's going to save you a lot of mental process. The pencil lines are going to definitely guide your future steps in the painting process. Anyway, here I have started the grisaille. After you have a finished drawing detail, start with your grisaille. The grisaille is this video unfortunately doesn't show just the grisaille, which is this area right there, only white. That is the grisaille. Unfortunately, this short video that I'm looking at right now has some color in the background because I already started the color layers. But anyway, this is the grisaille with white, titanium white. You gotta start building up the 3D, the volume of all your elements in the painting. Look at the face of this old man. Just using white and taking advantage of the red bowl in the background, you can construct almost like a black and white. If the bowl would be black instead of red, you would have a finished black and white picture before you start adding the color. And Titian always said color is the last thought in the mind, meaning that if you do not have a good grisaille, you're never gonna be able to have realistic painting with volumes and giving that 3D impression. Anyway, I took this video with dim light just to show how the use of shades and white lights, white layers of paint helps you push forward your characters from the painting. Using the background, dark background, push your characters forward to give that 3D effect. Here obviously I finish the background, the garden where Susanna was taking her bath. She's sitting there on a white marble block, and I here already finished adding the layers of color on the old man in the gold tunic. Anyway, how do you achieve this skin color? is by adding layer upon layer upon layer of very thin out oil color, very thin, transparent. And Tishan said that even 40 layers of color is not enough to give the skin a realistic feeling. So I will be honest with you, at the end of this painting, when I finished this painting, especially in Susanna's body, there were some areas where I had to apply about 50 or 60 layers of different colors to give that skin feeling. So don't you count the layers, just apply until you are satisfied with your final product. Look at the face of this character right there. In some areas you can count easily 20-25 layers of color to give that realistic feeling. Even the right shoulder in the back require many layers. Okay, about the tunic, to give that silk texture, again I use 20-25 layers of different yellowish colors to give that feeling. This tunic, the red one, is made of thicker silk, so that's a different texture you gotta give to this red tunic. Then what Susanna is wrapping her body with is a thick cotton tunic, almost like a towel, and the texture for that is different. I had to use many layers of white and bluish and light blue layers of color to give that feeling of thick cotton tunic. What else I can tell you? Again, do not start adding layers of color until you are satisfied with your grisaille, because once you start colors you cannot go back and start adding white. One big mistake painters make is adding thick layers of white when they want to give brightness to some areas. For example, the forehead of any of these characters, just to give you an example. If you want to give that whitish brightness on the tip of the forehead, or in the closer part to the observer of the foreheads, and if you go ahead and apply an impasto of thick titanium white, for example, you're just gonna ruin your painting. That thick impasto is gonna look horrible to begin with, and with time it's gonna crackle crackle, and if you apply that to the face of a character, right there, you just lost that character forever. You're gonna have a crackle on the forehead or on the nose or whatever. So the secret for these bright areas is to start with a good grisaille, and kind of be careful. I know that nowadays painters like to impasto everything. Everything's impasto nowadays. Impasto. But if you want to impasto something and you want to add thick areas of paint, you got to do that in the grisaille. Don't do that in the upper layers of oil, because you're just gonna end up with a unrealistic feeling to your painting. That famous impasto is for the grisaille only, in the Venetian style, of course. I'm talking about the Venetian style. Impasto is for the grisaille with white color only. And let me tell you about impasto. People think that because you add impasto you're gonna look good and cool and you're gonna look like a good painter. You have to be very careful with impasto, because impasto is for some areas, for certain types of texture, but it's not for everything. We're not gonna be Rembrandts here, impasto everything. Rembrandt was a master of his own technique, but if you are working on the Venetian style, that is a different technique. So please be careful with impastos. I will give you an example. For example, here, if I want to use impasto, I would use it here on the tunic, Susanna's white tunic. I would use impasto there in some areas just to give it texture, like here at the bottom in between her legs. I did use a little bit of impasto, but I didn't go crazy with it. I would never use impasto on skin surfaces, because that looks horrible. Unless you want to emphasize wrinkles on the face of an old person, definitely impasto is something. And here, okay, I'll tell you this. I use wide lines of impasto to give the hair of this guy a little volume, a little more realism on his hair. But that is a good area to use impasto. Anyway, moving forward. So after you have applied all the colors, the layers of color, and you are satisfied, and if you the other thing is, you have to let one layer of oil color dry before you apply the next. Otherwise you're gonna end up with a muddy grayish, greenish mud color everywhere. The secret for the Venetian style of painting is that you have to let the different layers of different colors show through as the light goes through them and bounces back from the red ball back to the retina of the observer. I'll tell you that, for example, here in the leg of this man, I've used several different colors to give that impression, that idea of skin. One of the layers is actually greenish. I have a layer here of burnt sienna in some areas, some bluish. You can see the bluish part in the bottom of the foot, white, orange, and all those layers gotta show through the other layers that are on top of them. So that's why you gotta apply the layers in thin, oil diluted, thin layers, in order to give that effect of 3D and multicolor effect that people love so much about the Renaissance paintings like Tintoretto, Titian, Raphael, Da Vinci, but mainly the Venetian painters. Even in the greener areas in the background, I use multiple layers of different colors: blues, yellows, yellow ochres, light blues, even a layer of burnt sienna in some areas. So if you look closely after the the painting is finished, you will see how there's an effect of color changing in some areas. Very nice, very nice. Anyway, we'll continue with the process in a minute. Well, at the end, we just have to add the layers of color until you are satisfied. And again, I want to emphasize that don't be counting the layers. If it's going to take 100 layers to achieve an effect on one of the characters of or one of the elements of your painting, so be it. The more layers you apply, the more realistic your painting is going to be. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, make your comments, leave your questions if you have any questions, and share this video with the students of the Venetian style, people interested in the art. And thank you again, and I believe this is all I can do for you guys today, and see you next time. Thank you.